Okay, so inshallah we'll begin our program proper in a very bit. So just a bit of intro of our two panelists. So Ustazah Hidayah Azman is an alumnus of Madrasa Al-Islamiyah. She has a Bachelor in Usuluddin, honors with distinction from University of Malaya, grad diploma in applied psychology and diploma in positive psychology. What a combo. She's a Chief Creative Officer of a Bahifa group serving the community through initiatives and platforms such as Better Than Yesterday, You Be Well, Hustle with Purpose, and Brothers of Strength. She's also a member of the Ustazah Youth Network and member of the Malay Youth Task Force of Youth Corps Singapore. You can follow her on Instagram, Nurhi Dihats. And I believe she also has a podcast. I think check that out as well. So Brother Muhammad Khair is a marriage, family consultant, veteran community leader. He's a founder of Suchi Success Initiatives, a consultancy with his wife, Madam Suryati Abdullah. He's also a co-organizer of Protect the Family Town Hall. He has also designed, developed, and delivered sexuality education programs for various ministries and agencies such as HPB, MSF, MOE, MUIS, Malay Muslim organizations, churches, and temples, as well as other local and regional NGOs since 2007. Thousands of participants from various ethnicities, faith, and other backgrounds have benefited from the sexuality education programs run by Mr. Muhammad Khair and his team. So now, let's just kick off the first question, okay? But before that, I would like to just frame this conversation today to perhaps one or maybe even just two from the LGBTQ++. Sexuality, later on whether Muhammad Khair can explain a bit more. Now we have a lot of alphabets. So today, in particular, we will talk about homosexuality and maybe perhaps a little bit of transgender. So let's kick off the first question to Brother Khair. What is homosexuality?
Alhamdulillah. Auzubillahi samil alim min syaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wa bihi nasta'in ala umuri dunya wa din wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wa mursalin sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for kicking off the event and inviting all of us to be here. Yes, I agree with you that this session was planned for way before the announcement made by Prime Minister during National Day Rally. This is really part and parcel of Perdaus's monthly education program for public to benefit from. So coincidentally, this this particular event falls right smack after the announcement by PM Lee. So I think we just ride on the wave and help the society to understand better. So what is homosexuality? Homosexuality is basically about attraction. Homo means the same. Attraction, there are two parts to it. One, it could be romantically attracted. The other could even be sexually attracted. And the other one is actually on the behavior itself. So there are two parts to it. One would be the attraction. Okay, this is where sometimes we hear terms like same-sex attraction, SSA. So it is more the attraction. And when you talk about attraction, usually we are looking at, if you were to deal with the issue, it is more at the psychological level. The other one is on the behavior. Sexually, they are attracted, and of course, they behave in a certain way, and especially sexual behavior where specifically, and when we refer to, since we mentioned about 377A, previously, or even until now, because the section has not been removed, it's still there. It would have to be debated in Parliament, but as of now, when we look at the act itself, generally it is an act of sodomy where intercourse, or this is about sexual behavior, where intercourse or sexual intercourse between two individuals instead of between men and women. In this instance, it is conducted by persons of the same gender. So here I want to clarify, when you talk about homosexuality, it is very much more not into gender identity per se, but it is very much into sexual orientation, the thinking, the orientation, where a person would be attracted more. So this is one part, attracted more of the same gender. You notice I'm using the word gender, the same gender, so it could be male or female. So if it is male, then that attraction, usually now it is called gay attraction, between men and men. When you talk about between a woman and another woman, it is called lesbian. So there are two parts to it. So the other one is the attraction. Okay, attraction doesn't mean you are already doing it. So the behavior part may come in later, or may not even come in. There's this attraction going on. We have come across such individuals before. They have not done anything as far as the action and the behavior is concerned. But the moment they move into behavior, well, as far as the law is concerned, as of now, under Section 377A, when it is done in private, under the current section, it is not an offense, but when it's done in public, yes, it is. But in other countries, and even in Islam for that matter, which Ustazah will mention later, that the act between men and women is something which is not permissible in general. So homosexuality encompasses that, but there's also another aspect to homosexuality. So we have, I just mentioned the word gay, I just mentioned the word lesbian. There's also another part to it, bisexual. The reason why I would include bisexuality under the umbrella of homosexuality, because a person who is a bisexual is attracted to both gender. So if a male who is a bisexual attracted to female and also to male, dua-dua je bedal, dua-dua. So attracted. And a bisexual can also be behaving sexually by having sex with both male and female. So that's why in much of the discussion that I've had, I would also include bisexual under the umbrella of homosexuality, because the attraction and also the behavior include not just a heterosexual, the general, the normal way in which individuals between two gender will be attracted to one another, but also it includes homosexual or homosexuality elements into bisexuality. So I think I leave it at that first, the meaning of homosexuality for the moment. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Brother Khair. So maybe perhaps we will get to the questions, the deeper questions later on. For now, we will go for the next one, which is for Ustazah Nur Hidayah. What is the ruling of hukum on homosexuality and gay marriage? Also, what is the evidence of the hukum in Islam? Ustazah, please.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. So, inshallah, to begin, I think it's quite a deep dive to straight away go into what is the hukum on the matter. But I would think that inshallah, as with all of us, we are aware that we have this important identity with us, that is the Muslim identity. And especially living in today's world, when we approach many things, or in fact everything, one of the important things that we need to remember, to consider, is this part of us, and that would be our Muslim identity. And having this identity will also entail us with a sort of guideline by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and definitely this is translated through the Qur'an as well as the Sunnah. So at least for the first part, there are a few references to the Quran and the Hadith that I would like to share with all of you, so that we understand better on this approach. Because I would think that we would all prefer to go the route of, okay, this happened, what is the hukum? That happened, what is the hukum? But the religion is more than that. It's more than just the rulings, but it's more of understanding the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala behind how the religion has been created, and why we are following the guidelines that has been provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with regards to that, perhaps I can share the very first one, which is Surah Al-Baqarah verse 208, where Allah says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udkhulu fis silmi kafa wa la tattabi'u khutuwati shaitan innahu lakum aduwwun mubin. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded us, right? And he calls upon those who believe. He said, "O you who have believed, enter into Islam completely and perfectly." Or in other words, to enter into the religion wholeheartedly. And Allah continues with, and do not follow the footsteps of the shaitan. And definitely this is a constant battle that we are facing from the very beginning of time until the day that we die. And if you were to interact with Quranic verses, one thing that you need to note is that when you interact with verses that are a little long or very long, which includes a lot of pointers, the biggest messaging will always be towards the end of the verse. So which is why when we approach Quranic verses, we have got to take everything, right? We have to take it as a whole, and of course into context. And towards the end, it says, "Innahu lakum aduwwum mubin," right? Indeed, he is to you a clear enemy. So when approaching, be it topics like tonight or any form of struggle that we may face in our life, one thing that we have to be clear is that we are not against each other, right? And we are not here to find fault in others, but more importantly, we want to see what is of truth and how can we go on that path of truth together and supporting each other. Because at the end of the day, we have a clear enemy, right? And that would be the shaitan. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights this very important part where he says to enter Islam or to accept the religion wholeheartedly. And this is where, when we speak about the topic on homosexuality, sodomy, orientation, and things like that, I believe that you might have heard, these verses, or in references to the story, especially the story of Prophet Lut alayhi salam. And here it spoke about sodomy, here it spoke about immorality of such actions. And at least from Surah Al-A'raf verses 80 to 81, Allah SWT says, "A'udzubillahi minasyaitanir rajim, wa lutan idh qala liqaumihi atatuna al-fahishata ma sabaqakum biha min ahadin minal alamin." And we had sent Lut, Prophet Lut alayhi salam, when he said to his people, "Do you commit such immorality as no one has preceded you with from among the worlds," i.e. the people. And it continues with, "Innakum lata'tuna ar-rijala shahwatan min dunin nisa bal antum qaumun musrifun." So indeed, you approach men with desire instead of women, rather you are transgressing people. So here are some of the I'd say references to perhaps our topic of conversation tonight, but I'm not going to stop at here because there will be some other pointers that I'd like for you to really reflect, ponder, and think about. And part of which is understanding the fitrah, right? Understanding the nature of the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And at least if we can pick up one, that will be from Sahih al-Bukhari, where it is narrated by Abu Hurairah, where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, right? He said, "Ma min mauludin illa yuladu ala al-fitra, fa abawahu yahwidanihi aw nasiranihi aw yumajisanihi, kama tuntajul bahimata jama'a, hal tuhissuna fiha min jada'a." So here Rasulullah SAW reminds us that no child is born except on fitrah, right? Except on Islam, except on the basis of its nature. And then his parents makes him Jewish, Christian, Majusi, as an animal produces a perfect young animal. Do you see any part of its body amputated? So here, focusing this particular hadith, it focuses on how we are all created with a certain form of nature. And inshallah, as we go into our conversation tonight, where we speak about these different genders and various sexualities and things like that, one part of the important nature that we have got to hold and understand is that it is in the nature that Allah SWT created men and he created women, and how when the union of these genders come together, it would be men and women. Okay, but before I pass it back to Brother Khairi, I think these are some of the things that I would like to also highlight based on some of the verses and the hadith that we have viewed earlier. And of course, this is reflecting on the irshad that has been provided, whereby we understand that Islam emphasizes the building of families through marriage between male and female, right, as the basic foundation of society. And of course, beyond that, any form of sexual relationships or unions or intercourse that might happen, and that is not based on that legality, then definitely that is prohibited in Islam. But again, on top of that, there are some other things that we have got to think about and consider, because most times when we approach the hukum, we will always feel like, oh, it's a cookie cutter matter, and then it applies to everybody. So of course it's something that we follow, but we have got to also understand some of the context, the concepts, as well as perhaps some of the blind spots that we may overlook. So some of which that I would like to share as a start would be how desires are not sinful. Okay, and it is not the identity of a person. So later on we will see that difference between the action of the person as well as the identity of the person, and then it is only sinful when a matter is acted upon, and of course with regards to our desires, when certain desires are not in line with the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we are rewarded when we do not act upon them. And also, part of which is, as we are going to speak about tonight's topic, it's understanding that we don't want to cross certain limits, boundaries, or lines, in a sense where we go on the path of permitting, right, what is prohibited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and prohibiting, right, what is permissible by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also moving forward, as we speak about tonight's topic, it's also important for us to understand, right, the issue at hand, and where do we stand as the Muslims that we are, inshallah. So at the end of the day, what we are looking at is always working on that path of pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and seeing what are some of the guidance that has been provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be it for tonight's topic or other topics related to our lives, inshallah. So pass it back to Brother Khairi for now.
MashaAllah, beautiful. Alhamdulillah, thank you so much, Ustazah. Okay, I have so many questions to ask them right now, but I think if that is the case, you guys won't have any time. So let's just move on first to the next question, yeah? So this one is a bit interesting, more personal, I suppose. So to any of you who are listening, who are going through this, perhaps this might apply to you. And I would like to direct this question to Brother Khair. What can I do if I suspect myself to be gay or attracted to the same sex? Brother Khair, please.
Okay, I think this is a very interesting question, and yet very sensitive. Not many would want to come out, be open about it, throw this question to anyone for fear of some form of reaction negatively from people around. Okay, this is pretty, I wouldn't say normal, but the fear of being responded to negatively is always there. So if you, okay, what do you mean by suspect? Okay, so some of the indicators like this, when you begin to be, when there's a guy walking past you and then you begin to be more attracted compared to another person who is of the opposite gender. So that could be one way. That could be one, as far as attraction is concerned, as Ustazah has mentioned just now, so-called no offense disclosed, from the police. So that was probably from the police force. So we call it NOD, no offense disclosed. So there's no sin to it. So if you suspect that you have that kind of attraction, and then you find, okay, different degree of attraction. Okay, some only at the beginning, the other could be maybe a bit more intense. What you may need to do is, of course, no denying, you must first resort to making dua to Allah SWT to help you to overcome. This is an important aspect because I believe senjata is the one potent method in which, dua is one important method of actually seeking help. So making that dua is very key. The only problem is sometimes people do not feel that that's an important step. And very key is also this: if you believe that it is something which is not desirable, not unwanted, or something unwanted, and it appears in your overall psyche where, okay, where you feel you are more attracted. The thing we have to make that decision is this: when I feel comfortable with my friends who are boys or who are male, that is not same-sex attraction, please. Okay? I like to play football with my friends who are male. I like to hang out with them. Okay, and I even love my friends of the same gender. That's not SSA. That's not same-sex attraction. What's the difference between No, I like to talk to my friends, I like to message, I like to chit chat, whatever. The thing is this, what differentiates between normal feeling towards friends and seriously, I can even love my brother in Islam. There's no issue. Another sister can even love another sister in Islam. There's no issue. That brotherly feeling has been around since time immemorial. So there's no issue. But the moment you feel romantically attracted, what do you mean by romantically attracted? That extra feeling of love, affection, and the feeling of wanting probably to even move on to the next level or even touching for that matter, that's already bordering, that bordering into activity. One is attraction, the other one is action. And the other level is this, not only just romantically attracted, you begin to have sexual arousal. So that's the difference. How we differentiate between SSA and also just another feeling of love for your brother or for sisters among sisters. Because I have this question before, can I love my brother? Of course you can. See, love is, this is where I need to dispel some misconception. We have heard some narrative, love is love. Yes, correct, love is love. But in Islam, there are boundaries. So here I would like to take the opportunity where we can love our brothers, no problem. I love my brothers in Perdaus. No problem. I've known the council and Brother Khairi too. I love all of you, but there are boundaries. Okay? The boundary I want to set is basically be mindful of romantic feelings. Okay. Some people ask me, what is meant by romantic feelings? Romantic feelings is basically when you look at the fellow, and there's a different kind of love that comes out in your heart. You simply want to. Yeah, I must also be mindful of my words. Sometimes brothers and brothers, when they meet, what do? They hug, right? So is that an act of homosexuality? No. Okay, hugging is not an act of homosexual. No. I hug my brothers in Islam long time, but I don't have the romantic feeling. Okay. It's just that brotherly love. We like each other. We appreciate the presence of one another. We hug before, when we come and meet, the first time we meet or whatever, and before we depart. But the moment you have that romantic feeling, you want to be alone, okay, you want to give that touchy-feely kind of words to one another, okay, and then, okay lah, if I were to extend that hugging, you begin to use your hand to explore more of the brother's body, okay, you begin to want to touch here and there. That's where the boundaries are blurred, okay, then I think that that's something which the question that we ask here, what can I do if I suspect myself to be gay or attracted to the same sex? So this is something which I want to give some guidelines. Okay, otherwise it's not. So don't get the wrong thing. If you meet your brother, your cousin, whatever, same sex, no issue. Okay, you shake hand, you hug. Even sometimes I meet some long-time brothers or even activists in the Islamic world, whether local or overseas. Sometimes even some shuyukh, even they hug me and even they give me a peck on the cheek. That's not same-sex attraction, please. It's not. Okay, that's brotherly love in Islam. Okay. But the moment you feel extra, okay, the moment you feel sexually aroused, sorry, I'll be very direct about this. Okay, that means you begin to feel something in your heart pounding very fast, or even you begin to feel around your genital area, some strange stuff begin to happen. I think that's the part where you need to be concerned. Okay, so what do you do? Then, like I mentioned just now, you go back to Allah SWT, seek help. And the next thing that you may want to do is basically to seek help from a counselor that can help you process. Later on, you can discuss further why these things happen. If there's two schools of thought, so to speak. One is that people are born with it, okay, which upfront I say I disagree, because many research have shown that people are not born with it. And the other one is actually the environmental factors. Okay, in this program, we're not going to go into the DNA section of this whole thing, but I just give these two schools of thought, so to speak. I belong to the other one, where we believe that what Ustazah mentioned just now, parents we have the responsibility to decide the kind of texture, the kind of color even that our children will eventually be. That's part of Islam. So whenever someone suspect and when they go for a kind of counseling or therapy or whatever, some of these things, but it also depends on who you go to. If you go to a counselor that's going to affirm you to be gay, then the process will be different. But if you go to a counselor that help you to distinguish, they help you to identify where these things come from and probably help you to even overcome it. Okay, there are so many former gays in the world, or those with that SSA thingy who eventually come back to Fitrah. There's so many of them. So it depends on you meet up. So as of now, as much as I can say, if you suspect you probably gay, you don't worry. Don't get, when you suspect means you have not done it. Okay, that feeling part. But if you think, because I've come across cases, these are real life cases where seriously this youth didn't know. I almost cried, I tell you, when he came to me, Jahir, I didn't know that having sex with another male is wrong in Islam. And even it's wrong in the usual contemporary secular context. He didn't know. No? I mean, that part really broke my heart because how come he didn't know? But there are people who didn't know actually. Okay, so the fellow committed already, but he regretted. He wanted to return to normalcy. Alhamdulillah. And now I heard that person is doing Alhamdulillah very well. Okay, so those are rare occasions, but those things do happen. So when you use the word suspect, then you have to ask, suspect at what level? Suspect is it at the attraction level, feeling level, or you have done something and you're not sure. So in that particular case, the person came to me, clarified, and eventually, yes, that's an act of homosexuality. So he did it, but then he came back to Fitrah, Alhamdulillah. So I hope I've answered this question, inshallah.
Okay, that is a very elaborate explanation. However, I would like to get Ustazah's input on this topic as well. Ustazah, could you just give us maybe a few words on what to do if they suspect?
Okay, Bismillah. So I think the suspect part has been covered extensively by Brother Khair. But I would think that perhaps, some of the things that we can think about and consider when we move forward with this challenge is to understand that this is also a struggle, right? A struggle for the self, or it could be a struggle for others, because essentially in the world that we are living in right now, in the way how Allah SWT has created us, He created us in a form of difficulty, right? Where Allah SWT mentions, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, right? He has created us in a way that we are situated with challenges. And the topic that we are discussing tonight could be, one of your struggles, or one of the struggles of the people that you love. And perhaps some of the things that I can also share or to add on top of what has been shared by Brother Khair is understanding that there are differences to a person's identity as well as their actions. And more often than not, sometimes we start to define, ourselves with the things that we do, or we define ourselves with the struggles that we face. Because in reality, at the end of the day, my identity, right, or all of our identity is actually we are created to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is our core identity. But when we talk about our actions, this would be what is of sinful, what is of rewards, and it includes our struggles as well. So we want to see how we are able to bring these struggles, right, into conformity with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants out of us. So really, it's that understanding of not defining, right, ourselves with our struggles, with the challenges of life, but being true to the core that at the end of the day, I am a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am here to please Him. And if this is one of the struggles that He has blessed me with, in order, right, for me to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's a challenge that I want to take and want to overcome. And definitely if it is, from the POV of another person, it could be that it is a struggle of the people that we love, the people around us. So it's always about how can I support, right, these people to work towards betterment, inshallah. And beautifully, if I can share with you a narration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is recorded in Sahih Muslim, whereby it was narrated by Abu Hurairah that some of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam actually came to the Prophet. You know, the nature of the companions of the Prophet would be, if they have the littlest of problems, they will tell Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If they have the biggest of problems, then they would do the same. And one of which, interestingly, as recorded in this hadith, they came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they asked the Prophet a question, or they expressed to the Prophet on a certain matter. And here it is said, "Inna najidu fi anfusina ma yata'azamu ahaduna an yatakallam bi." So they said, verily, we perceive in our minds that which every one of us considers it too grave to express. So there were some thoughts that were disturbing them. There were some things with regards to themselves, with regards to God, with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with regards to the religion that was disturbing them. And it came to the point whereby even they couldn't express that to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What they did was that they expressed the essence of the difficulty that they are having with those thoughts. And that was where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, right? He said, "Waqad wajadtumuhu." Do you really perceive it? And they said, yes. Qalu na'am. And that was where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam continued, "Qala dhaka sarihul iman." Right? The Prophet said, upon this, he remarked, that is the faith manifested. So here, there are a couple of things really for us to look at. But what I want us all to focus on would be that even the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had thoughts, thoughts which were unpleasant, difficulties within them that they felt uncomfortable with. But it is with that discomfort that can actually help us to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because if we continue to live in a life of comfort, if we continue to live with a life that does not come with any form of challenge, then what sort of motivation can be present to actually help us to be much more sincere, right? Servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another one would be, since we spoke a little bit earlier on the references of, not wanting to follow the khutuwat shaitan, which is the footsteps of the shaitan. Here, as recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari, where it was narrated by Abu Hurairah that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Inna Allah tajawaza li an ummati ma waswasat bihi suduruha ma lam ta'mal aw takallam." So here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah has accepted my invocation, i.e. the invocation of the Prophet, right? To forgive what whispers in the hearts of my followers unless they put it to action or utter it. So perhaps this can actually help to further echo what has been mentioned by Brother Khair, right, on the matter of suspecting. But even if it is a matter of suspect, even if it is a matter that has been within us for quite some time, but the Prophet ﷺ has highlighted that there is no sin, right, within a matter until the person acts upon it, until the person puts some form of steps moving forward on the thoughts that they have. But if it is just a thought, if it's just an inclination, if it is something that is just within us, then we would want to go back to this expression of the hadith, seeing that our pursuits to battle and overcome what is within us is in fact a great big struggle. But to those who may be struggling with that, I pray that may Allah SWT ease your fast and help you to overcome and allow us all to be open hearts to also support those who might be struggling as well. And before I pass back to Brother Khairil, a verse from Surah At-Tawbah, verse 51, where Allah says, "A'udzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim, qul lan yusibana illa ma kataballahu lana huwa maulana wa 'alallahi falyatawakkalul mu'minun." So say, never will we be struck except by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for us. So essentially, everything that is happened is by the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even if we speak about the recent section that has been highlighted also, right? It is something that has been decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the end of the day, we want to hold firm on the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for that He is our protector, right? He knows what He is doing. He is doing His job greatly, and our job really is towards the end of the verse, where it says, وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَلْيَتَوَكَّلِ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, and upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let the believers rely.
Mashallah, thank you so much, Ustazah. Okay, so before I continue further, right, I am just moved by this conversation so far, but I think two words really come up to me very strongly. And two words are, number one is struggle, and number two is perimeter. And the reason why I say perimeter is because I think we all talk about Islam as a way of life or as a guide. And I think we need to also put that into the context of a conversation. If you want a liberal idea or perhaps a very mainstream thought on this topic, I think this conversation is not for you. However, if you are a believer, if you believe that God is one and the Prophet Muhammad SAW is our prophet, then I think Ustazah actually talk about the first ayah that she mentioned just now when she opened with her session was, if you want, I'm paraphrasing, if you want to enter the religion, you have to enter it fully. So this is us, in our very limited capacity, trying to better ourselves. So please understand that this is what we have signed up for. Okay, so we are now just trying to learn. And when Ustazah mentioned struggles, I believe that we will all be tested differently. Maybe for someone, it is this, homosexuality perhaps, and perhaps for other people, it could be other things, sickness, poverty, etc. Therefore, I think we can just we take that into a consideration. And now we move with a bit of empathy. I think when I speak to young people, right, they always like to ask this question, to be honest. And sometimes they say that it's their friend, but then when you actually look at them, right, it could actually be them. So perhaps a little empathy goes a long way. Now, the next question I'd like to pose to Brother Khair: how do we treat our friends or family members who are gay? So I think that is something perhaps we can know how to learn and navigate, because I think it's a real situation happening, and putting aside the law, this is human to human interaction, which I think we cannot run away from. And Brother Khair, please.
Yeah, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
Sorry, Brother Khair, could you unmute your mic, please?
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Very key is this: never engage on the idea of condemnation. I think that's very key. We are not here to be a judge. We are here to actually invite others. And probably even in the process of invitation, we send across messages. In Malay, we call it dakwah. It's not dakwah. Okay. We are not here. We are here to do dakwah, not dakwah. Dakwah means to condemn, to throw judgment on others. I think that's key. So if you have family or friends who are gay, they are still family or friends. Yeah, they are still in our midst. So very key, very important, because I've come across quite a number of cases where families actually disown their members of the family who eventually make known that they are gay. So that's key, because we would like, okay, some people say cannot what, but they are doing some kind of sin. Okay, let's be very clear down here. How many of us are really without sin? We are also sinful, right? So commit sins. I know that there's a different degree of sins, some big, some small, whatever. To me, when we have friends who are gay, family members who are gay, we look at them with sympathy, with empathy. We look at them with rahmah. But at the same time, very key, we cannot, see, this is a major difference. Now people are confused, okay? Accepting them in our midst does not mean approving the work that they do. That's very key. That's very important. Having them around does not mean we 100% agree with them. Okay. Having that feeling of same-sex attraction, not acting upon it, is different from having it and promoting it, and then we agreeing with it. So that's the major difference that we need to know. So very key, if we have the capability, the capacity to actually invite, engage those family members or friends who are gay, get them to think, eventually with the objective of bringing them back to fitrah. That should be what we should be doing. Never alienate, where possible, keep on engaging. I know some people have been telling me, but the moment we talk about it, they're going to whack us. Okay, let them be lah. Okay, we don't do the same. We still convey the message. And if we find that they are not receptive, maybe take a break for a while and find other approaches to actually eventually get them to think about it. Remember, we are here not to change. Changing is the job of Allah SWT. Our job is to convey. Our job is to sampaikan in Malay. So, and of course, once we convey, we invite, we do it together with dua, with prayers to Allah SWT, so that eventually Allah help the person who come back to his fitrah. So, very key is not to be yaya papaya, thinking that we can change people around us. Sorry, we don't do that. It is not within our capacity to change people. It is his job, not our job. Our job is just to convey, to make sure that they are not out of our circle where possible. But if they decide to leave us, it's beyond our control. If they decide not to talk to us, it's beyond our control. But continue to be respectful. See, being respectful to them does not mean we approve of their lifestyle choice. I know some people are very angry when I've been doing this work since 2006, 2007. When I use the term lifestyle choice, I got whacked. Okay, being thrown label bigot, hate speech lah. In my understanding of this whole issue, yes, it is a struggle, but at the end of the day, if you so decide to continue with this lifestyle without even making attempts to want to change, it is your choice. Later we talk about where this is come from. I don't want to cover that topic now, but I think as far as treating our friends or family or gay, treat them with kindness, in my opinion. Do not alienate them, do not throw them out of the house, don't throw them labels. And pray hard that one day, inshallah, they come back to their fitrah. Allah, that's my response to it.
Thank you, Brother Khair. Ustazah, could you just give maybe perhaps your thoughts on this as well? How do we treat them? I think it's somehow similar to Brother Khair, or maybe you have something extra.
Okay, Bismillah. So I think if I can echo further what has been mentioned by Brother Khair earlier, it's also understanding that, when we have a different view, or if we do not agree on a certain matter, or we do not conform towards something, it doesn't mean that the person is in the wrong, or it also doesn't mean that perhaps we are hateful, right? As long as it is a choice, a pursuit that we are taking that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we can definitely, and essentially we have to, right, coexist with different people from different backgrounds with different views as well. So it doesn't mean that, if I hang around with a certain group of people, then I am of such, or I agree on such matters as well. And perhaps if there are a couple of things that I can further expand on that, it would be to understand that, when we continue, to hold this Muslim identity that we have, and if we continue to hold on, some of our religious truths, some of our principles, it doesn't mean, or it doesn't equate that, we become intolerant of others, because part of what has been taught by our religion itself is that nobody has the right to mistreat others, right? Nobody has the right to condemn others. And it is important for us to, as much as we are trying our best, to embrace the truth, we have got to realize that, nobody is any lesser than us, because essentially everybody is trying, even going back to that question of, how do we treat others who are gay, or those who come out with a certain gender identity or sexuality. And also, part of the pursuit of upholding the truth, if we follow the footsteps of the best example, which is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it definitely does not entail us to dehumanize other people, or to bring other people down. And perhaps some of the things that we want to consider would be that, as much as we want to stand our ground, right? We stand on our ground with what has been taught to us by the religion. The way we approach others, and especially those who may be holding a different view, or maybe holding a separate identity altogether, our approach will always be wanting to go on that path of that prophetic mercy, Okay, and even if you reflect on the experiences of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mixed around with a lot, right? Many different groups of the community, but that doesn't define, right, who he is. So if I can just share briefly, inshallah, since Brother Khairil earlier has highlighted a little bit on empathy. So definitely empathy is something that we want to go for. And I hope that you will also bear in mind to differentiate that, right? To differentiate between empathy as well as sympathy. And the empathy that we are looking at, more often than not, if you learn a little bit about this part of the knowledge, you will learn that, okay, there's this thing called the cognitive empathy that goes directly to your cognitive, right, which is your brain, which is your mind. And then we also have the emotional empathy. So it's always it always surrounds the approach of wanting to understand a person, right, what they are going through, or to recognize and understand, the emotional state of others and how they process their emotions or how they process their behaviors. But what I want to share tonight would be a little bit more focus of the empathy, and that would be the prophetic empathy. So it's not just about, okay, do I want to empathize through my cognitive? Do I want to empathize through my emotions? Do I want to empathize through a certain skill or through a certain way? But I want to empathize. I want to practice empathy in the way of how my prophet, right, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, has taught us all. And speaking about how do we treat others, right? Be it the question earlier or others who may be categorized in other different how should I put it, categories. At least for this, the approach of prophetic empathy would be, as mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, where he says, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, laqad ja'akum rasulun min anfusikum azizun alayhi ma antum harisun alaykum bil mu'minina ra'ufur rahim." So there has certainly come to you a messenger from among yourselves. Grievous to him is what you suffer. He is concerned over you, i.e. your guidance, and to the believers is kind and merciful. So when Rasulullah SAW was sent to us, right, he was sent to us to teach us a lot about kindness, about mercy, and it is something that we need to practice into our lives when we interact with others, including ourselves as well. And another thing that, if I can share as part of that prophetic empathy, was what has been mentioned in Sahih Muslim, whereby Abu Hurairah reported that there was a time where the people who disbelieved, they continued to curse, right, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his pursuits, his Lord, his companions, and so on. And of course, becoming the companions of the Prophet who stood by him, they were affected as well. And it got to a point whereby they were so angry, they approached the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and they requested the Prophet to curse back those who have cursed him. And that was where beautifully, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Inni lam ub'ath la'anan wa innama bu'ithtu rahmatan." So I have not been sent as the invoker of curse, but I have been sent as mercy. So think about, if I want to approach a person, if I want to talk with somebody, even if when it comes to the point of I want to advise somebody, I want them to reflect on something, I want to interact with them, at the end of the day, is this the way of mercy? Is this the way how the Prophet ﷺ would have done it? Is this the way in which that it can bring them closer to the truth, closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is it otherwise? Because the last thing we want is to be that reason that people go further away from the religion, further away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we are not able to do anything, then follow the ways of the Prophet, in which that we can approach it through the dua. But if we know, perhaps we have certain skills, we have certain knowledge, we have a certain form of approach that can help our brothers and sisters who might be struggling, then always choose that path of mercy, inshallah. Yeah.
Mashallah, thank you so much. Okay, so I think we are also getting some comments about our topic so far, and some are quite testy as well. So let me just share a little bit, yeah? So I think empathy is something that it's how we deal with human beings, and we should never forget that. And we need to understand what is fact, what is the law, the ruling, and how then we approach people are two separate matters. So I think later that my panelists will explain that further if any more similar questions, pertaining to that comes into play. However, I also like to let you just consider.
Big stripy baby.
So there was a YouTube video that I saw, and it was an alternate universe where homosexuality is the norm and heterosexuality is the opposite. So it was a very interesting concept, but perhaps if we put ourselves, you know, our very, what do you call it, very shadid minds into this situation, into the shoes of those who are experiencing these emotions and feelings, then it might give you some pause, you know, before you want to just say your peace of mind or give a fact or a verse and then just put it on a person's face. And that is all the empathy I think that we need to practice. Because I think just now one of the panelists mentioned about sinning. I do not think that any of us are not without sin. And maybe sometimes a sin of someone is more noticeable than someone else. So before you want to point fingers at others and condemn them, perhaps look yourself in the mirror and then see if you are as clean as you think you are. So let's all go on to the next question. So the next question would be how to continue being resilient in Islamic values and not be influenced by peer pressure and discrimination. So I believe that right now we have to take a stand, right? It's either you're with me or you're without. And if you're without, then we should cancel you or something like that. So perhaps, Brother Khair, could you just perhaps give us some tools of how do we navigate this quite uncharted waters for most of us? Brother Khair, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is a very good question. How do we strike that balance? I think just to add a bit more to what I've mentioned and what Ustazah has mentioned just now, very key is this, not to be confused between, you know, there's a hadith where it is mentioned when you see something is wrong, if you have the power, change it with your hands, otherwise with your mouth, otherwise in your heart. Okay. So basically what we're saying is, as far as we are concerned, homosexuality is not permissible in Islam. So say it outright, but say it in best possible manner. Okay. So we are not saying that we try to cover, no, to make things look so nice, as if nothing happened. It's okay, continue to be homosexual. No, we don't. That's not that's not what we are talking about here. Very important is when we convey the messages to our friends, to our family members, we have to convey what Islam means by homosexuality is wrong. Yeah. So that's key. The way you convey is also important. There are so many ways in which you can express your opinion. So here, what we're saying is express the best way possible so that eventually the person can continue to listen to what you have to say, rather than turning it into a confrontation. You don't have to, right? We can look. I've done it so many times. I can say to my friend, look, this is something which probably it is not something that you may want to do, but you are struggling with it. But from the Islamic point of view, this is something which is not acceptable in Islam. Okay, so no, we can continue with the engagement. So that's very key. And when we talk about conveying the message, whether it is conveying to Muslims or non-Muslims, there's actually not much difference. We are supposed to convey the message, we convey the message. Okay. And what more if the person is very close to us? So when you talk about being resilient in Islamic values, we have to be very clear. As far as being a Muslim is concerned, conveying the message does not mean you must convey it with a very stern face. Does not mean that you must be angry at the whole thing. Does not mean that you have to be a judge all over the place, throwing judgments to other people. We are supposed to convey, say it out. Okay, certain things when it is not in line with Islamic values, say it out, but do it in a way so that you can continue with your work, rather than being slammed and then people just walk out, for example. But I must also be careful when I say this, because I've had so many experiences when even when you convey in the nicest way possible, non-confrontational, people simply just shout you out. It happened. So it depends on your nasib too lah. You can try to be the nicest person on earth, and yet if the message that you deliver cannot be accepted, there's nothing else you can do. If you have done your best to convey in the best possible manner, you know what I mean? Okay, because it also happened during the Prophet's time. So very key is this. The adab of conveying is super important too. Do not discount the importance of conveying your message with adab. So when you talk about resilient Islamic values, okay, we may be very upright, but remember, it is us that want to be upright. But once the moment you want to convey any Islamic value, any kind of opinion, do it in the most respectful way possible. It does not mean, to Muslim, you give them the harshest possible treatment. No. To non-Muslim, you can be a bit more subtle. I think both. In my opinion, when the Prophet at the time, when he conveyed the message, he conveyed to all. His rahmah is to all, Muslims and non-Muslims. So the message you deliver to all must be consistent. It does not mean, okay, to family members, you must be a bit more harsh because they are your family. You will love them more, so you must give tough love. I don't think that should be the way to go. And when you talk about peer pressure, recently, or even discrimination, there's even this thing called reverse discrimination. Recently, even the Minister for Law and Home Affairs, Mr. Shanmugam, mentioned something to do with the thinking of how the government should actually guide this thing called cancel culture, that kind of stuff. It is prevalent. And when I say prevalent, yes, it is there out there. People are using labels to shut you off. At the same, say this is exactly the same thing. We should not be resorting to the same method to shut people out. There has to be engagement. That's key. There has to be engagement. The thing is this: we do not practice cancel culture, but others, if they want to practice, really we can control. So that's why I think it's very important, in line with Islamic values, we learn as much as possible about what is it that is permissible, not permissible in Islam. And if it's not permissible, not only from the Islamic point of view, but also from other perspectives. Example, some people ask, okay, now that 377A, eventually it's going to be repealed, it is not an offense to engage in homosexual activity, please, particularly to engage in anal sex. So I just use that word. So why are you so, why should Islam still stick? Islam is Islam, in my opinion. Okay. It has its own values and principles. In Islam, it is still not permissible. It is still haram. Okay. But I've actually done some other ways in which I explain to others, yes, the law may not be, it may not be unlawful anymore to engage in anal sex, but you may want to consider other aspects of the activity itself from the scientific point of view. What does it say?
So,
okay. So I think,
Bro Khair, I think,
Yeah.
when you mentioned that part, right? Just because the law says so, it doesn't mean we as Muslims shouldn't partake in it, right? For example, alcohol in Singapore is permissible.
Yeah.
But as Muslims, as practicing Muslims, do we then consume them because it's permissible
Yes.
by law?
Exactly.
I think this is where, you need to also understand your identity. What is it? And if you believe, if you say you believe you're Muslim, you submit, then you need to also follow the parameters, the boundaries that, the Islam has also come in. And so, Ustazah, I'd like to just ask your thoughts, right? When we want to hold our ground, do we also then have to choose to not be liked by most people?
Okay, Bismillah. To answer your question, it will definitely go back to again and again our purpose. And that would be to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, choosing to do the things that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because I think a lot of us, we are familiar with the concept of, I cannot please everybody. I cannot make everybody happy. I cannot say the nicest things to everybody, and everybody regards it as it being the nicest. But which is why we will always want to take, right, on that path of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what would be his approach, what would be his take on matters. And even in the narrations, we have seen that how Rasulullah SAW approached, in which he has approached it with the most merciful manner, but there were still people who were opposing it. There were still people who were not appreciative, right, of his efforts to kindly approach the community. So it is definitely part and parcel of that pursuit. But it also doesn't mean that, if I choose truth, I am choosing people to hate me. I'm choosing people to to not be on my side and so on. So it's always about, how can my choices and my approach, please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think if we are able to touch a little bit on, navigating through this ever-changing world, perhaps right now tonight's topic is what we are challenged with, but definitely moving forward, there will be greater challenges ahead, with the ever-changing world, right? And if I can just highlight a little bit about maybe, the standards of what we are used to living with, especially in today's world, how normalcy, right? It doesn't really equate to the correctness of the standard, because people change and the standards of people will always change as well. And the standard that is always constant will be the standards of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is why we are following his guide through this entire pursuit. And if I can relate to a verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about Salih, where it is mentioned, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإلى ثمود أخاهم صالحا قال يا قوم اعبدوا الله ما لكم من إله غيره هو أنشأكم من الأرض واستعمركم فيها فاستغفروه ثم توبوا إليه إن ربي قريب مجيب. So, and to Thamud we send their brother Salih. He said, "O my people, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have no deity other than him. He has produced you from the earth and settled you in it. So ask forgiveness of him and then repent to him. Indeed, my Lord is near and responsive." So to reflect on the current question that we are looking at, and also this whole entire ever-changing world, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights, right? Huwa ansha'akum min al-ardi wasta'amarakum fiha. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has produced, right, for us this particular earth, this particular life that we are living in. And wasta'amarakum fiha means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed us in this earth. So reality, whether we like it or not, we are situated in this world, which is full of tests and full of challenges that we are facing every single day. But it's not for us to be stuck and be complaining and be stressful of all that is happening, but it's always looking at what can I do, right, to either make it better, to make my situation better, or to make the situation of others better. And in wherever, right, that we are placed with, not placed with, in wherever we're placed at, right, it is also a place of taqwa. So I believe that most of you have heard of the term taqwa before, but if I can briefly share what taqwa is all about, it's always choosing how can I please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whatever that I choose, whatever that I do, and whatever that I stand for. And at least here, Abu Salih reported that a man said to Abu Hurairah about what is taqwa. And then Abu Hurairah then asked him, right, have you ever taken a thorny path? And the person said, yes. And then Abu Hurairah said, what did you do? And the man said, if I saw thorns, I would avoid them, pass over them, or stop short of them. And Abu Hurairah said, that is taqwa, zakat taqwa, that is God-fearing mindfulness. So the whole idea of taqwa, especially where we are all situated at in this particular world, it's saying that you are going on that thorny path and you are taking care of yourself, ensuring that you do not hurt yourself in the process, ensuring that you do not hurt others in the process, and ensuring that every step that you take is towards a straight path, right? A straight path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which is why, if I can just take this opportunity to share a dua that we all can practice, because we all have that Muslim identity, right? So a dua that we can practice that has been taught by our scholars, whereby it goes like this: Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه, which means, Ya Allah, show us the truth as true and inspire us to follow it. Because sometimes what is presented to us as of truth, sometimes it's difficult for us to follow. So we ask Allah, if it is something that is true, show me that it is of truth and help me to want to follow that. But if it is a matter that is presented to me and it is of falsehood, and it could be that something that has been made part of the normalcy, and perhaps many perceive it to be of truth, but actually it is of falsehood. So we ask Allah, Ya Allah, if a matter is of falsehood, show me that it is a falsehood. And when I understand the reality of its falsehood, then inspire us or inspire me to abstain from it. Inshallah.
MashaAllah, thank you. I think this one also just makes me be reminded of our religion. We have two main sources. And I think if we stand by our two main sources, then inshallah we will be guided. Although we might not be popular, we might not be in the cool crowd, but I guess, our grave is only just for us, and then the hereafter is only for us to answer. So perhaps, choose your path, young people. So for this next question, I think it's very apt. Perhaps what if our panelists here can give us some tools, as young person, perhaps Bro Khair, I believe you are young at heart. Perhaps, if you could recall when you were at a much younger heart age, what would you be doing in this scenario? And then later, it's similar to Ustazah Hidayah. Bro Khair?
Yeah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I think very key is this. To me, knowledge is key. Iqra bismi rabbikal ladzi khalaq. We seek knowledge in the name of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And if within the context of our discussion, we can't go about addressing the issues. If we wish to address the issue, if we wish to address the issue, then we must address it with knowledge. I think that's super important. At the same time, we have a very clear and firm stand. We don't have to be someone who simply want to be popular or to be accepted by any kind of crowd, but go about conveying our message truthfully. You don't have to beat around the bush. Present the best way possible, okay, so that people can see. I think that's, to me, okay, I come from the background of being a trainer, educationist, and also I always feel that people need to know what they need to know in order for them to make a good decision. So present them as much facts with empathy as possible. So very, very key. We are not here to win votes. We're not here to be popular. We're not here to be accepted by the many. We are here to actually convey what we need to convey. So when you ask me what is my role as a youth, so if we so decide to walk this path of a da'i, for example, to walk the path where we could be someone whom people can come to and seek clarification, So I think it is important to equip ourselves with that knowledge. It's so super important in my mind. And I think in today's world, we are not only looking at just one type of knowledge, but if you have both, so much the better. You have the religious point of view and you have the other point of view. Okay, I have to be very careful. Islam is shumul, is shamil. It is actually a complete religion. So even scientific arguments, in my mind, they are also Islamic arguments in the first place. And in this field especially, even some people sitting at certain places of importance view this with information which they got many years back, which has now changed. For example, last year I was approached by someone, not to mention name, but someone pretty important in our society, asking me, people who are gay born with it? Many years ago, even Lee Kuan Yew was saying people are born with it, but now studies after studies, scientific studies have shown that they can't really find that gay gene. What it means is basically, when a baby is born, as in Islam, we believe that when a baby is born, they are born pure. So I think that's a stand we take. As Muslims, we take it that anyone born, they are not born as a gay, they are not born as a lesbian, they are not whatever, but they are born pure. So that today there are scientific evidences to even prove, yes, babies are born pure. So that actually strengthened my conviction. And as I move along, if I were to be a youth today, as I move along, I'm very convinced that no one is born such and such. And I'm here to actually help people understand, and where possible, even probably help them with the struggle, and eventually come back to fitrah. I must have that conviction. I cannot be someone, how I'm not sure. This guy say this, this guy. So if that's how I am myself confused. How am I going to play my role to help others to be guided? So I'm always seeking help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The dua which Ustazah just now recited, shared with us, super important. Every day we should be reciting it wholeheartedly. So eventually we are also guided so that we can help guide others, especially within this topic that we're talking. A lot of confusion, and sometimes people view it to be very complex. And my role that so far what I've done is to help deconstruct the whole thing and make things less complex so that it's easier for people to understand. Sometimes I use language can be quite straightforward because the matter cannot be delivered in ways in which people see vaguely. Because I as a trainer, when I deliver, I have to deliver the topic in ways and means so that people can see things very clearly. That's what I do. So when people say it's complex, yes, okay, but it can be made simple. If it is super vague, we can help people to see with clarity. I thought if I were a youth today, that's the role I would want to undertake, because this topic, it could be full of minefields, and I need to tread very carefully. Ustazah mentioned the hadith just now. If you have the taqwa, then we take that path of mindfulness. Be mindful of the minefields. Be mindful of the thorns around us. And to me, some of the thorns around us, as far as this topic is concerned, is the confusion of the matter itself. It is something which we must seek clarity. So that's why I'm always on the path of learning, gathering as much latest information as possible on the topic itself, so that we are very clear. And as of now, Alhamdulillah, I'm convinced that people are not born gay, not born anything else, but born with that fitrah. And it is the environment that eventually color the person. Allahu Alam.
Ustazah, I think I'd like to challenge you a little bit, if it's possible. If you are a young person going through the emotional situation, or you identify yourself as a homosexual, how then do you navigate this? You know, what are your tools or advices for them?
Okay, Bismillah. Thank you so much for the challenge. But of course, I think at the end of the day, I really hope to mention or share what is from our guide lah, which is the Qur'an and the Sunnah, inshallah. But maybe some things to ponder and think about will be, and especially as youths, and I would think this is with application to us all, definitely, whereby we are constantly trying to find, right, a sense of identity, and trying to see what is our identity as our actual self, our ideal self, what people perceive of us, what we perceive our own selves. And especially on this topic tonight, it might be strange and a little uncomfortable to talk about, but because even the topic of sexuality in itself is a personal matter, right, to a person's individuality. So to answer the question that has been mentioned earlier, right, how do we then navigate if we are struggling with this? I would think that the first thing is understanding that the most important tool is, of course, knowledge, as mentioned by Brother Khair earlier on, that without knowledge, we are not able to navigate through things. Without knowledge, we are not able to differentiate what is right and what is wrong. And which is why what has been presented to us, i.e. the Quran, is there for a reason. It is there to actually help us to identify, right, what is on the path of truth and what is otherwise. But speaking about knowledge, it is something that is we are not able to reach if we are not blessed with it, if we are not blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that particular knowledge. And which is why in the Quran, there are so many du'as, and there is only that one particular du'a that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us to ask for more, and that would be Rabbi Zidni Ilma, right? Many times we ask, oh, Ya Allah, please bless me with the goodness in this life and the next. Ya Allah, please guide me with this. Ya Allah, please protect me from that. But the only dua that was asked of increase would be, Ya Allah, please provide me an increase in knowledge, and of course knowledge that is beneficial, knowledge that is of truth, knowledge that brings us back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in order for us to have access, right, to the rightful knowledge, we would then first and foremost need the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perhaps the question that has been proposed to me by Brother Khairil, is a topic on its own. But essentially, we are all trying, right? We are all trying to navigate through all of the challenges that we are going through, including what has been presented through tonight's topic. So number one would be the guidance, right? So earlier I said knowledge was number one, but before knowledge even, it's actually the guidance. And which is why every single day we ask from Allah, Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim, Ya Allah, please guide us, right, to the straight path. Because without guidance, we don't know what to do. Without guidance, we don't know where to go. And if we continue to work on asking, Ya Allah, please bless me with guidance. Ya Allah, please allow me to be guided on this journey, that it's with that same guidance that Allah SWT will help us to say the right words. Allah SWT will help us to make the right choices. Allah SWT will help us to meet the right people, either to help us in the process, or the people who can advise us in the best manners, in the manners of mercy and kindness, definitely. So tools would be guidance, asking for Allah constant guidance. Guidance is not something that we ask for just for one day. We all need guidance. Even myself, my name is Hidayah, which means guidance. I am still in need of guidance every single day. And also that pursuit of knowledge. But I think thirdly would be the right companionships. It doesn't mean that, when I am struggling with tonight's topic, I do not deserve to be friends with people who are pious. I do not deserve to be friends with people who are not struggling with whatever that I am struggling, because we are who our friends are. Our religion is who our friends are, and who we surround ourselves with is important to help us to move towards betterment. Because at the end of the day, for most of us, we cannot do things on our own, and which is why, we are all created to live on this earth together. So we need that right support. We need that support that can help us to be better. We also need that right support to help us to work towards habits which can bring us towards betterment, and definitely replace the things which can bring us difficulty in the process, inshallah. So I would think those three things lah. Number one, guidance, asking for guidance from Allah SWT. Number two, knowledge. And then the third one, the right support or the right circle of companionship. Yep.
Thank you so much. MashaAllah. Beautiful. Ihdina Siratal Mustaqim. If you are familiar with that ayat, it's from our Al-Fatiha. And if you were to ask how many times do you recite it a day? 17 times. Hopefully you know the answer. And perhaps I think also if you just want to add a little bit, not many of us perhaps know the full meaning of the Fatiha. And I think Ustazah mentioned, and also Bro Khair mentioned, knowledge is important. I think if you want to subscribe to Islam, and if you say you are a Muslim, you need to go and check out your basics, get that right. Al-Fatiha, very simple. So you think, but very powerful. Check out the meaning. In English, in Malay, Mandarin, whatever language you use, yeah? Go and check that out. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. So now we will go to the more interesting part of our session, the Q&A. So I've been getting a few questions in already. Some are quite testy. Okay, now the organizer has already showed the questions up. So the first one, without further ado, Salam, a question please. How do we best respond to a non-Muslim's question on why homosexuality is prohibited? For example, in a workplace environment where everyone, including the company itself, is very politically correct or woke, liberal, etc. The current ruling, which is filling office corridor conversation. Thank you. Any takers, Ustazah or Bro Khair?
Okay, shall I go first, Ustazah?
Okay.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Waalaikumsalam. Okay, yeah, I think this is a common question. Very, very common, especially now within the context of 377A may eventually go away. So how do we deal with such things? I think I mentioned earlier on, important to first, as Muslims, we must firmly believe that it is not permissible in Islam. Number two, it is not easy to convey to non-Muslims the Islamic point of view if only we quote from the Quran or the Hadith. Very difficult. So what we need to do is, as we mentioned, Ustazah and myself mentioned just now, as far as the knowledge, the domain knowledge is concerned, as far as homosexuality is concerned, we need to understand, even from the medical point of view, sexual health point of view. I know it may be not comfortable to mention some of these things. I train teachers in this area, and teachers also say that some of these things are a bit difficult to mention, Example, I may want to venture into what scientists are now saying. When you talk about homosexuality, yeah, okay, the ruling is such, one day, 377 when we go away, but the act itself has pretty clear harmful side effects. Okay? As far as the attraction is concerned, at that level, okay, you don't act upon it, and if you really want to address it, there are ways to do it. Okay, there are ways to do it. But as far as the act itself, the act of sodomy, okay, where the male genitalia goes into the anus, I think that act itself, from the medical point of view, there has been a lot of research documenting how the harmful effects are present. Even though there are other point of view where they say they can use condom and all those things. But in my mind, that in itself is sufficient to say that homosexuality is not something that people should engage in freely. Okay, example, a lot of bacteria are found in that area. So once you have a foreign object that goes into it, and if it is not protected, so to speak, even if it is protected, in our program, we say that it is not uncommon for people to wear protection, for example, condom, for the condom to actually break. And when it is broken, when you test that kind of stuff, the bacteria gets into the other person's body. And one major side effect is this thing called anal incontinence. What it means is eventually, because that particular organ is not meant for anything to enter into, it is actually meant for something to exit from the body. So if it is done over a period of time, the function of that particular part of the body may eventually be lost. The ability to control that muscle, to control, may eventually be weakened, and things from the body may simply flow out without control. So we call it anal incontinence. And of course, the other side effect would be science and data, scientific data show there's a higher degree of HIV or STI infection. STI is sexually transmitted infection, and HIV is one version of STI. Higher degree of infection among men when they engage in anal sex. This is scientifically proven. Data all show to us that, whether in Singapore or elsewhere. So there are other scientific evidences too. I don't want to go into detail, but these are some examples in which we can actually just share with our friends, non-Muslims maybe, or even Muslims for that matter, how homosexuality can have its own drawback. So that's why, from the Islamic point of view, I sometimes say this to even non-Muslims. Allah created us, He knows what is best for us, and evidence from the scientific world has shown, since we go against nature, this is the side effect. As to whether we want to accept or not, that's another, but this is how I see things. This is how I still feel as a Muslim. Homosexuality is something which we should not go into. This is how I will respond, basically. Yes.
There's quite a very logical and scientific way of answering, which I think, growing up, when I had questions on why haram, why halal, the food, for example, why can't we eat certain foods? And then when you go to the scientific part, my logical mind, right, start to shape some understanding, and then maybe from there, knowledge increases, and then your belief, therefore, hopefully, inshallah, also increase. So, Ustazah,
brother, just one more thing, just to add. I just want to express this little concern, because data from other countries where sodomy law has been repealed, when homosexuality begin to be accepted as maybe a norm, initially people may see it just between men and men, but data from other countries also show that it may affect women, because then heterosexual couple begin to venture into anal sex, and that's where the problem starts affecting women. When you talk about anal incontinence, for example, and there could be some other side effects, then they begin to suffer from that. Initially, no, but once they begin to see, it's okay, what? So they begin to experiment. And I must also say, we have come across cases, real life cases within our Muslim community in Singapore itself, heterosexual couple, Muslim, where they say that they venture into this from time to time.
Right.
Really, these things have happened in our community. So we have to be very careful. So we're not only looking at non-Muslims, no. We're also looking at our own Muslim community. Be very careful about it. Doesn't mean the law has been repealed. It is okay. So we can experiment into this, please. It is an area where I would discourage anyone from venturing into it, even though as husband and wife.
This seems to
Allah.
be like a separate topic that I think perhaps might get quite a lot of attention, I think, when you talk about the scientific parts of it.
Yes.
Ustazah, could we talk about the second question that was posed then? And can we say to them, I respect your feeling in this matter, but I will not encourage you in this matter as it is not our Islamic way of life? Or is there a better way of saying to them?
Okay, Bismillah. So definitely understand the standpoint of this person as well as the experience, because sometimes you are placed in a situation where you don't know what to do, you don't know what to say, or even you are perhaps like a minority, perhaps in your own company or in your own workplace or school environment, or it could be that you are the only, for example, the only Muslim, and then you feel like, you know, you are the representative to your religion, like you know, not you are that representative, and perhaps some of the views that you want to express would also be affected in that process. So can we say to them, I respect your feeling in this matter, but I will not encourage you in this matter as it is not our Islamic way of life. Okay, definitely that is one of the ways in which that we can express that. And I would think it's not just pertaining this topic, but there are many other topics when it comes to the religion that might be a struggle to articulate. But as with the struggle, right, can I just share one thing with you, and that would be the hadith or the narration of the Prophet ﷺ, where he mentions in Sahih Muslim, where it is narrated by Abu Hurairah that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Bada al-Islamu ghariban wa sayaudu kama bada ghariban fatuba lil ghuraba." So Islam started, or Islam initiated, as something that was strange, and it will revert to its old position of being strange. So good tidings for the stranger. So here it speaks about the essence of the religion, and how when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preach and guide the people, it was something that was strange, it was something that was difficult to accept. And at least for us, we are living in the end times right now, in which that Islam is slowly moving back towards that essence of it being strange. So when it comes to conversations like this, and then wanting to express some of our views or to explain perhaps some of the religious beliefs and practices, it might be difficult for them to accept, it might be difficult for them to comprehend also, and this could also be due to the fact that the religion is now at a state of strangeness. So of course, something that is strange, something that is different, it is something that is difficult, right, for people to accept. And on top of that, that is where we need to realize that it is okay if they do not accept. It is okay if they are not open to it. If it is okay if they still want to hold their ground and still continue to believe in that, because, you know, we are not here to convert people. You know, we are not here to make sure that everybody has the same viewpoint towards everything. But what we are here to do is to convey. We try our best to, you know, articulate our position, and again, with prophetic grace and with prophetic mercy. Because at the end of the day, what we want to express is what we believe to be true, and what is of the religion, right? It is all it all belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, the religion doesn't belong to us, and whatever that we convey is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has conveyed to us. So we cannot change people, we cannot change their standpoint, but we can definitely lay out what we believe, what we understand, and whether the person or the party would want to accept it or otherwise would be totally up to them. But of course, moving forward, if you feel like, you know, after they keep asking you questions and then you struggle to answer, number one, it could be maybe I struggle to answer because I don't have much understanding of what has been asked, or I don't understand this part about my religion. So definitely a self-reflection moment to ask yourself, okay, maybe I do not know much about this. Maybe it's time for me to learn so that I can articulate better, so that I can practice better. But also on the other hand, if such questions are not comfortable, then this is where it is important for you to articulate what you feel. Perhaps, conversations like this at the workplace or in this environment is not fitting for me. Maybe I'm not the right person to answer the queries with regards to the religion. If you are much more interested, then maybe I can link you up with somebody who might be much more learned to articulate what I'm not able to. And of course, moving forward, it's also important to set, that healthy boundary, most importantly at the workplace as well, to set boundaries and to mention what is of respect and what is not of respect. And whichever times where you feel like certain boundaries are crossed because of such conversations, then you need to express that, of course, in the ways of mercy, so that they understand, so that they can respect you and you can also respect them, and so that you can work harmoniously, hopefully, inshallah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ustazah. Okay, so now we have 2 more questions I was told by the organizer. Can we look at the 2 last questions before we... Okay, now this one. Do boys growing up in a female-dominated families take on effeminate characteristics? How can a parent manage his effeminacy, and do effeminate men always turn out gay? So, Bro Khair, could you perhaps give your insight on this question, please?
Yeah. Okay, good question. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, thank you for the question. I think there's some misconception running around in our community. Effeminate male, it's not equal to gray. Okay. I think we should actually be very clear when we see someone with a certain characteristics, walk in certain manner, speak in a certain way, maybe effeminate. That does not mean he or that person is a gay. Okay. Gay, as I mentioned just now, it is that attraction. All right. And as long as the person keeps that attraction in his heart and mind and does not display in a certain way, being, okay, contoh in Malay they call it, there's a word where I know to some it may sound offending. Sometimes they use the word ondan or bapuk. Okay. That may not mean that person is gay. Not necessarily. The person may walk, may talk, maybe close to like the mother, but that in itself does not make the person a gay. Probably if we understand better and we understand the issues, it may not be even about, we're not talking about homosexuality in the first place. It could be something else. It could be even the issue of gender identity, which we have to separate between sexual orientation and gender identity. It could be one together in the same person, or it could be separate. So when a boy, a man, a male person raised in a family where more females abound than there are male, that does not mean that male person will turn out to be a gay. I think we may not have the time, but if we go into the kind of research and the kind of cases where gay come back to become normal men, where they come back to fitrah, and the reason why they become gay, among others, it may not necessarily be because they grow up in a female-dominated family. That may not be the major contributing factor. I just touch and go first. One major contributing factor is about abuse. If I've come across some mothers, Malay mothers, I'm talking about Malay mothers. I've seen some Malay mothers as I grew up where even recently I had a chat with a very senior, I call them, kakak. There are some mothers whom actually would say, you grow up, you behave like a boy, don't behave like a girl. Okay, so it doesn't mean that in the family where there are more female, the boy will turn out to be another female. No. Should the boy appear to be another female, that is not gay in itself. That could be an issue of gender identity where the person may enter into the issue of transgenderism, okay, which is not the topic tonight. Okay, we don't want to go into that. So be very careful. The reasons for a person being gay may not be this issue down here, all right? It could be the issue of abuse, I've come across such issues where a person is abused when growing up and eventually hating the opposite gender. Hating the opposite gender. I don't want to go into details of the abuse, but that's the outcome. The process of growing up end up or resulted in that person hating the opposite gender, and the only way to lead his life to him or even her is to actually have a couple of the same gender, have a partner of the same gender, sorry, not couple. So be very careful lah. Effeminate does not mean I've got some relatives even who are like that. They are not gay. Yeah, okay, okay. So, but I like this question. So I think let's get it out of our mind. Any boy growing up in a female-dominated family may take on effeminate characteristics, but that in itself does not make that boy gay. And it may not even make that boy go into the issue of transgenderism. We have to be very careful. Be very careful. Kecuali except when clearly the person eventually demonstrates something else, which I'm not sure whether this is the topic on hand that we must handle tonight. But the answer to it is be very careful. Effeminate does not mean the person is gay. Yes.
Thank you, Brother Khair, for the clarification. To our esteemed audience, I know that we are out of time, 9:37. We would like to seek your cooperation, that we will extend this to 9:45. Max, hopefully, inshallah, we have just one more question that I think perhaps you might want to know the answer to. So we'll see about this, yeah? So just give us some more time. Inshallah, we will wrap this up beautifully and succinctly. So now, next one. Is it true that the government is changing the constitution to protect the definition of marriage? Many are blur about this. While we are magnanimous in how we treat gays, but it's not reciprocated, they can be invasive to our values and want to break down walls just for greater acceptance, especially the gay groups. So how should Muslim organizations respond or band together? It sounds a bit like macam you want to take on these people, but I'm not too sure. So perhaps the panelists could give us a very clear and hopefully concise answer. Anyone, please?
Okay, concise answer. Just quickly, yes, the government is doing something to the constitution. Of course, there are two ways of doing it. One is actually to enshrine the definition of marriage on the constitution itself, where marriage is defined as between men and women. But I think what the government is trying to do is include a phrase in the constitution so that the definition of marriage in the women's charter cannot be changed easily. That's the other way out. So, but yes, in terms of changing the constitution, yes. But how it is changed, there are two ways to do it. Okay. So pray hard that whatever the case is, the definition of marriage, whether the first method or the second method, would not be easily changed. At the end of the day, I want to emphasize it is the education of our society that's important. As long as the society holds on to the belief that marriage is between men and women, and the majority holds to that belief, I think the definition will not be changed by whoever the government would be in the future. So to me, the key to it is actually education again. And about the second part, before I end my part very quickly, I cannot disagree with the second part of the question where in fact, this session to me is magnanimous. We put in how we should behave, how should we present ourselves in the midst of all the talk about homosexuality, repeal and all those stuff. But at the same time, I cannot disagree also that they can be invasive to our values and want to break down walls for greater acceptance. I think this is the part where Muslim organizations need to be very clear on our position and how things should be handled. It cannot be hazy. Okay, as far as our principles are concerned, see, this is why it's very important to understand engagement at different levels. Engagement at one-to-one level is different from engagement at national level by government, for example, or by Malay Muslim organization, for example. So certain narrative has to be stated out very clearly. Otherwise, people get confused. I don't want to go into this because I've come across a lot of such feedback from the ground. But one thing I must say that the narrative, the messaging from Malay Muslim organization got to be extremely clear what is the position in Islam and how we are treating this matter as much we want to deal with the matter with full of respect, rahmah, at the same time, do respect us of our position. I think that's very clear and has to be transmitted across to all in such clarity that there's no doubt of the way we want to look at the situation and the way we would like to be reciprocated. That's my response. Wallahu alam.
Thank you so much, Brother Khair. Ustazah, do you have any short, concise answer to this or thoughts?
Maybe just additional thoughts, or just want to share one narration of the Prophet ﷺ where it's mentioned Sahih al-Bukhari that Abu Musa reported that the Prophet ﷺ actually mentioned innal mu'mina lil mu'min kal bunyan yashuddu ba'duhu ba'da, which means a faithful believer to a faithful believer, right? They are like bricks of a wall whereby they continuously enforce each other, or they continuously support each other. And with that narration of the Prophet, what the Prophet did was that while he was saying that, he clasped, right, his hands together and then it interlacing his fingers. So I think the greater goal that we want to go for would be us coming together, right, supporting each other, and like that bricks of a wall, because definitely coming together will also include coming together with different views and then different positions and different experiences, but it's always thinking about what is the greater goal out of this union and how we can uphold what is of truthful with great mercy, inshallah. And definitely maybe to those who might want to break down walls, for greater acceptance and so on, at the end of the day, we will never definitely be clear of a person's intentions or plans, but definitely what we can do is to try our best to work towards upholding what is of truthful, inshallah. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ustazah. Okay, so I just checked my chat. Apparently, some of you guys have been DMing me as well. So just maybe a quick one, if I can just give you an answer to my best of my knowledge. So someone was asking what reason or drive made you feel more attracted to the same sex. I think if you are asking this question, means you are not going through this, inshallah. So therefore, you know what, pray for the people who are going through it. And you know what, it is not for everyone. Secondly, questions about political leaning. So, mashallah, with political aspirations, these people, young people, good. In Malaysia, cases where ulama used homosexuality as a political issue to win votes from conservative Muslims with the aim of revitalizing Muslim society. How do we as Muslims avoid such a mentality from scholars who could try to subtly manipulate us violently against homosexuality in these and other such contexts? I think, inshallah, if you recall, Bro Khair and also Ustazah sharing just now, if you know your knowledge and you have empathy, I think those are good starts. And of course, the number one tip from Ustazah just now was guidance. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim, something for us to also take heed and follow. So with that, I believe we have come to the end of our session. We will close this with Tasbih Kafara. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. And Surah Al-Asr. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana fi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa amilu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqqi wa tawassaw bis sabr. Errors or anything that might not be to your expectations, please do forgive us. Please keep us in our prayers. And inshallah, we'll meet you in another time. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a good evening, everyone.